I think it's probably a good as time as any to get started. And as people trickle in, I just wanted to say to everyone, hi, thank you for joining us today. My name's Faisal. I am the Scanlon Foundation's Communications and Stakeholder Engagement Coordinator. And on behalf of the Scanlon Foundation, I'm delighted to welcome you all to this information session on the 2021 Annual Community Grants. To begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we meet today, wherever we are around Australia, and pay my respects to their elders past, present. I extend that respect, of course, to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us today on this Zoom. Before I begin, and before I invite our Foundation's Programs Manager, who is just here, Rachel Scotland, I also wanted to introduce you to Anthea Hancock, of course, if you haven't met her already. She's our Foundation CEO. Rachel will present in a moment, but we'll just go over some quick housekeeping rules. And as you notice, considering the sheer number of people that are joining our Zoom today, which is great, we thought the best way to manage the questions that you might have is directly via the chat function. So throughout Rachel's presentation and at any point, do feel free to utilize that with any questions that you might have. For those that have sent in questions earlier, thank you. We've made a note to respond to those where we can. We've dedicated some time at the end of the conversation to directly deal with those, with Rachel and Anthea to lead that. But if you've missed anything, if you feel like there's something that hasn't been covered, this conversation is being recorded and we'll send that through to you. And at the end of this conversation, of course, when we're able to. So with that being said, I'll now hand over to Rachel, Rachel Scotland.
Great. Thanks, Faisal. Welcome everyone, and good afternoon and good morning to our West Australians who have joined us. I want to start as well just by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, which is the Bunurong people. And it's land that starts up at the Arts Centre in Melbourne and extends down along the eastern coast of the bay and wraps around the bottom. And it's a really beautiful part of the country, so I feel really lucky. I just want to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging. So today we'll have about an hour. We've scheduled about an hour. I'm hoping I'll only speak for about 30 minutes. And as Faisal mentioned, I'll try and answer some of the questions that have already been sent through. I'll try and sort of deal with them as I go through in the relevant spots. But do feel free to just pop your questions into that chat function whenever it comes to you and as we go. I might be able to deal with some of them on the way through, but if not, I'll leave a good 20 minutes at the end for us to have a bit of a discussion and hopefully finish early too. So that would be nice. We'll see how we go. Now let me share my screen. Great, so that should be coming up for everyone. I'm just going to drop me down. Okay. So this session is targeted to those who are probably new to the foundation. So I think if you've received a grant from us before or we've partnered together before, a lot of this might be familiar to you. I'm going to try and cover some of the fundamentals, particularly for people who haven't received a grant from us and might be new. But hopefully there'll still be something in there for everyone. It'll be useful for you. Also, just to acknowledge that this is just our approach. So everything that I'm sharing, it's really just what we look for in this particular grant. And we know how frustrating it is. Every funder is different, but hopefully it'll just be useful for you for this case. So for today, we're going to cover an introduction to the foundation, just to give you a little bit of context of who we are, where we've come from and what we do. The purpose of the annual community grants, and obviously that's why we're all here. How to apply, I won't spend too much time on that, so hopefully that's not the hard bit. The key application sections, I'll spend quite a bit of time around the key criteria and the budgets, which are often a little bit trickier. at the end, just some sort of tips around some features of a successful project and questions right at the end. So we'll get started. So Scanlon Foundation was established about 20 years ago, and it is the foundation of Peter Scanlon and his family. And over time, they've really strengthened this focus around social cohesion and the transition of migrants into Australian society. A lot of you might know our research, the Mapping Social Cohesion report that comes out usually November every year. Last year we had a bit of a COVID glitch and it was a bit late, but November's usually when it's there. And it really does inform a lot of our approach. It is a foundation to how we understand social cohesion and the work that we do and where we try and put money into in terms of the social programs and other research. That research now sits with the Scanlon Foundation Research Institute, which is one of our satellites. So the Research Institute is a great resource now, hopefully for all of you as well, and it houses that research as well as a lot of the other research that we're now producing, so a lot of the narratives and the essays. The annual community grants are our only public grant round. So it's a really important part of our year and of our sort of funding calendar. Sorry, I'll just looking at the notes. Moving on to our satellite initiatives, the Foundation's Research Institute is a key one. And then the other three, Community Hubs, A Taste of Harmony and Welcoming Australia. So I just wanted to go through these into a little bit of detail, just to give you a sense of the kind of scope of what we fund and some of the key things that we're trying to progress around social cohesion and the different ways that we do it. So Community Hubs are welcoming places based at primary schools, and it's where migrant families and particularly mothers with young children can come to connect with each other, to connect with their schools as well as services. They're gateways to connect families, and we've now got 76 hubs across 19 local government areas. So Community Hubs Australia is both the program and the organisation. A Taste of Harmony is a national workplace cultural diversity initiative and campaign, and we encourage businesses of all sizes to participate and to celebrate their cultural diversity by sharing stories and food. We've got about 10,000 teams and over 1,000 companies across Australia that participate. So hopefully you might also do a bit of a celebration each year through Taste of Harmony, and we've been doing a bit of work to try and get a few more online activities, obviously over the last year and leading into next year as well. Welcoming Cities. So Welcoming Australia is the national organisation, and Welcoming Cities is the key initiative, a national network of local councils committed to advancing Australia as a welcoming, prosperous and cohesive nation. And Welcoming Cities provides the national standard for cultural diversity and inclusion policy and practice. So it's a really tangible standard that local government can use, and I think it sort of covers a bit of where we're trying to do work systematically through at council level, with private industry, through businesses, as well as working directly with families through community hubs. So it's just a little overview and a little bit of background. The purpose of the annual community grants, so it has a very generic name, but a very specific focus. So we're aware that local councils often have community grants annually. Some state governments also, something similar, and they can be for a really broad range of initiatives and support multiple sectors. For us, the annual community grants are solely on employment and literacy. And it's really, it has changed over the years, but it's really come down to this, and I think they're the two key issues for us ongoing. We know that they're fundamental to social cohesion. We know how important they are to that settlement journey, and we're looking for always really practical applications of this. So I think one of the questions that came through from someone who registered was around doing some research. While we do support a lot of research through other funding options, the annual community grants are looking for really practical programs, both within the employment stream and the literacy stream, and trying to target what you're doing for a very specific group of people. And that's probably my key message for all of this information session, is around how specific we really like to see the applications and the project design. So showing that you really understand the very specific group of people that you're trying to work with, and you've created something that directly meets their needs. The geographic focus does change. So a couple of years ago, we were really targeting these grants to the local government areas where community hubs are located. They're all located in highly diverse local government areas. And so that was 20-ish LGAs. We've now, particularly with COVID, we've opened it up to any LGA across Australia. So this is eligible for absolutely anywhere. But it does get reviewed each year in terms of the focus and how we're doing this. Something that changed this year, we have increased the amount of funding that's available. The eligibility, you need to have deductible gift recipient status, and it's a really common question that we get. So you need to be an organisation that's registered as a charity, and as well, you must have that DGR status. So if you don't, you can't apply. You're not eligible. There are a few ways you can try and, you know, still develop a project and submit an application, but you'd have to do it with a partner that does have that DGR status, and you'd have to form some sort of partnership. I think someone popped in a question when they registered around being a sole trader and if they would be eligible. So you wouldn't be. But I think if you are a business and perhaps you're offering, you know, internship or employment opportunities, then it would be really great to see a partnership that you might have with a service provider who has really good connections to community groups and potential participants and can provide supports along the way that might be necessary and services. And so that could be a nice way to partner, and it would be that community organisation that would apply with their DGR status. Neighbourhood houses is just another good example. So they often run some really great programs, but they don't have DGR. So the applicant body is the peak body, the ANHCA. So they would apply, and it's then implemented by the relevant local neighbourhood house. Another question that's a different part of that eligibility, I know someone asked if they are a previous recipient of one of our grants, whether they're likely to get funded and whether that's viable. Absolutely. So we really welcome you to apply again. Even if you're a current recipient, you're still welcome to apply again this year for next year. It is just a 12-month grant for a 12-month program. And we know that the work that you do goes on much longer than that. And that 12 months does allow us to get to know you. So if you already have a grant and you're already implementing, it's a chance for us to get to know you and that work. It doesn't preclude you from applying in any way. The implementation timeline is 12 months. So we look at a calendar year then for the implementation from January to December. So it would start January 2022. But just to keep in mind that with our own internal timelines, you submit the application on the 17th of September, but you wouldn't get informed of being successful until December. So it's a little bit of a delay, and it's probably just good to keep that in mind in terms of your planning. So it would be announced to you in December. You can start implementing from January, and we do the grant agreements and the invoicing around February. So in terms of that timeline, just to keep in mind, key date is the application's closing on the 17th of September, 5 p.m. We do really appreciate it where you can submit a little bit early. I'm sure you know, certainly for those that do regular grant applications, there can always be some issues, and we do just really appreciate anything a bit early and just avoid any issues right on that 5 p.m. closing time. The funding, it has increased. So it was $25,000 last year and for a number of years previously. And we've increased that in acknowledgement of your costs increasing. So we don't expect projects to be bigger. It's just that, you know, we acknowledge it had remained at $25,000 for a number of years. And I think to be able to deliver the same thing, it's going to need a little bit of extra money. It links a little bit then to the size of the project. So often we get questions around how big a project and how many participants we would be expecting for this. And that really depends on who you're working with and the kinds of supports and activities and interventions that you want to offer. And it's going to be really different whether you're doing a really intensive program and you might be directly linking to an employer and offering internships or offering a whole lot of supports for a smaller number of people, or you might be doing something bigger, something that's a little bit more hands-off, perhaps if people already have skills and experience and you're just helping to provide some key connections. It really depends on what you're doing. So the third part is just how to apply. The Smarty Grants grant management platform is the one that we use, and this little excerpt, the little cutout here of the Community Grants 2021 that you're seeing is what you land on when you click that link, either in the email or on our website. I won't go into it too much. Smarty Grants is not very pretty. It's not the funnest of platforms, but it is pretty user-friendly. So we don't normally get many notifications of people having issues. Just to keep in mind, if you have technical issues around registration or things aren't linking, any issues with the actual application form, do contact Smarty Grants. So once you've logged in, there is an email contact for Smarty Grants themselves. If you have any queries around eligibility or the grant guidelines, then that can come to us. Hopefully we'll cover off any issues that you might have today. And I'll leave everyone with our email at the very end. So just some options there when you do go through. You can just preview the form just to get a sense of what's in there and what it looks like. And if you want to share that form, you can download it. But otherwise, once you're ready to go, you start a submission. And obviously you need to register. If you haven't before, or if you've changed organisations, you'll need to register again, and then you can log in. And once you've started, you can save and log out, log back in again, and you can share it with other people as well. So usually that's not too bad. You can always get in touch if there's anything going terribly wrong. I'll go through some of the key application sections. I won't go through the full application form. There's a whole lot of detail in there just around contact details and organisation size and that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to take out some of the key parts that we really look for and where sort of the bulk of the detail is for us. The first part is describing what your organisation does. And it's an opportunity for you to tell us a bit about how you work and who you are. So if you're a large service provider, or you're a social enterprise, or a volunteer-led community organisation, then it's really helpful for us to have a sense of who you are and how you work and what some of your priorities are. Providing a brief description of your project. I think here, just having a bit of an eye towards the key criteria that you'll be addressing next can be really helpful. I think often you could probably do 10 pages on your project and all of the different bits that are involved, but what's going to be most interesting for us and most important will be an overview of what you're going to do and what you're trying to achieve, but thinking about those key criteria that we're looking for that you'll actually answer in the next section. I will go through the key criteria in more detail next. What are the expected outcomes? So what's the impact that you're trying to have on all of the participants? What are you looking for? What does success look like, perhaps? And yeah. So I just had a little mind blank. There's not a huge word count for all of these. So just being really specific and thinking too, we don't judge the projects based on how many jobs people receive. For example, if you're doing an employment project, you might, and it is great to see what you're hoping to achieve in terms of internships or traineeships or employment that people are, you're aiming towards. But it is all of the other stuff along the way that we also want you to just show that you're thinking about around those supports, the increase in confidence, the connections that people are going to make, that they're also some of the outcomes that you'll be measuring. So if it's an employment program or, the number of jobs that you're hoping people might get, or literacy, there'll be a certain language acquisition that you might be hoping for. But it is also all the other stuff that sits around it that's really important, and it's nice to see that you're thinking through all of those parts too. The project budget, I'll go through in some detail after the next section. It's often a little bit of a tricky bit, only because every funder does it a little bit differently, and I think it can just be hard to see what we're specifically asking for, and some of the different, all the various things that you might want to cover, and how do you best capture that. So we'll go into a bit more detail next. So we'll go through the key criteria, mainly because this is a large part of how we assess the applications. So scoring, there's a number of things that come into it, but it is really heavily weighted towards this key criteria. So addressing each of the 5 in both streams and addressing them individually and just making it really clear how you're meeting each of those criteria is really important, and super helpful for us. We've allocated a little bit more word count this year. I think just it is so hard to try and capture everything that you're doing. It's sort of a balance between, we don't want you to have to give a huge amount of detail and make it too onerous, but equally just enabling you to have enough space to actually tell us what you're going to do. So feel free within the application just to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and individually answer each of those. So for stream 1, the building pathways to employment, the first part around the employment pathways is really just about saying simply that you are working with individuals and you're helping to move them into employment in various ways. And there are so many different things that people do in different industries and different ways that people support it. But it includes looking at the sort of practical resume writing, interview skills, presentation skills, as well as all of those employment confidence, all of the softer skills as well, interviewing techniques, business behaviours, resources they might need. So it's probably the more general criteria there, just about what you're doing that is employment related and putting people on that pathway. And again, just to reiterate, it is in that application form that giving people both linking into employment ultimately is that goal, but looking at internships, trainee opportunities, and just workplace experience opportunities, and volunteer experience as well, are all things that we really view highly. The local business engagement point 2, we do really want to see some good connections there. And I guess I mean good as in, you know, that you've had a conversation and you have some sort of established relationship, hopefully, with a potential employer. I think sometimes applicants might work with Job Active, and it can be helpful to go the next step, I think, and have a direct relationship with maybe a number of employers. Might be employers that are in a geographic location. You might be working towards a particular sector. You might be trying to get some people into aged care, or you might be working with Coles. So whatever it is to show that you've already engaged. I think the issue is if you're waiting until January when the project gets started, it is just too late, or it can really impact on your project. And I think you are trying to do 2 things. You are really trying to work for those participants and upskill them and really assist them. There is a sort of other side to these projects too that we like to see, which is around how you're assisting employers to be better employers. You're helping them to really connect with the people that you work with. You're helping them to be a more supportive employer. So that relationship is really important. The mentors, again, we like to see that there's something of a relationship already there, or that you already know where those mentors are coming from. And there's sort of a targeted selection of those mentors, building participants' networks and relationships is a key part of these projects often. So the mentors play a really big role in that, and they can be volunteer mentors or professional. Some people do pay a certain stipend to their mentors, some don't. Depends entirely on the kind of project that you're doing. Number 4 is diverse groups. So we do really like to see a diversity of the participants that you engage in your project. And it's a bit about, for participants, about increasing their networks and their relationships. So we just really encourage these projects to work across minority groups and not just with one particular minority group. And number 5 is the needs analysis, or a needs assessment, it's often called. And this, it can be a little bit tricky, I think, because what we want you to do is show that this particular project that you've designed has come from or is informed by the needs of the people that will be participating. So somehow we need to show that there's been some consultation in the past, that you have consulted directly with these people or these types of people, and I mean that in terms of their skill set or how long they've been in Australia or their age group, whatever it is that you're targeting, and that the way that you've designed it really meets the needs of what they want, and also it leads to the kind of experience or employment that they're looking for. It can really impact on your project, I think, if you have a great design, you know, a great idea of a project, but you don't have those participants already identified. It hasn't been sort of targeted enough, or it's not timely. You know, it might be a great project, but it's not the right time for those people. So if it's not done in the design phase and you sort of wait to engage once you're implementing in early next year, it's a bit too late again. It's going to really impact on your ability to get going and to really use that time well. And often it just, rolls in a few months and can make things really tricky. So the needs analysis is really important. It's great to see perhaps where you've got an existing project and you've had an overwhelming demand and you want to expand it. That is a great example. Or you've done some direct consultation with people, you know, you've had an idea and you've kind of taken it to certain groups and got some good feedback, and it's been designed, or a co-design process is great too. So that can all help for that needs analysis, and just being able to somehow show us that you've done that and that what you're presenting is from those participants. It's not ABS data or English language acquisition general data. We are looking for something really specific there about what you would like to do. So the next one is our second stream on the English literacy. The literacy criteria, that first one, it's just about showing that we do talk about innovative targeted methods for this. Look, sometimes I don't really like the word innovation. Sometimes if you're doing something good and you've done it before, you do like to keep doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's more about the how specific it is and how targeted it is. So knowing the people that you're trying to work with and what their needs are, and the way that you do literacy. And I think we know that one of the best ways to learn English is at work. You know, you're forced to speak it. It's really useful language. It's really relevant to what you're doing. But in place of that, where that's not possible, I think being able to provide people with these opportunities that are really practical and really a bit innovative, a bit different, can be really useful. And often the literacy, we do look to engage with people who are not able to participate in other language programs. So particularly pre the changes to AMEP, and though I know I've heard that those changes haven't yet really impacted on the ground. So, you know, in the past where people were ineligible for AMEP, or for whatever reason they can't access it, or it's just not working for them, then I think it's great to engage those people and see this as able to kind of fill those gaps in what's available for literacy. That second point of applied English practice is that it's really practical with conversational interactions, given a sort of workplace environment. You're doing daily activities, or workplace English, you know, report writing and presentation skills. So we just want to see that it's really useful for people. And again, that third part is that through this program, you're able to provide some practical support too around filling out forms or helping to enrol children in school, or buying ingredients, using public transport. There's lots of different things that can come under that. The practice with native English speakers, again, we just know that, and we've heard from, previous recipients and people that we work with, that this is where people really benefit and can really improve their English language capability, and also provide that relationship building and increase their networks and have that link with a native English speaker. And they may be volunteers, they may be people within your own organisation, they might be through any sort of internships or traineeships that's happening. Depends again on the project that you design, but just to ensure there's that opportunity. The fifth one, it's not so much a key criteria in that you don't have to provide it yourself. We just need to see that you've thought about it. So we know from the work that Community Hubs Australia does and from other research that childcare can be a key barrier for women to participate. But also for men, we want to see that you're, considering the childcare needs of the men and women that participate. And it might be referral, it might be provision through your project. It can be any arrangement at all. You just need to know that it's something that you've thought of. So that's there. Sorry, I'm just having a little look at the chat really quickly. I'll move into budgets. So that little top section there around the kind of project budget and income, I've just taken that from the form to try and make it look a little bit familiar, and then just listed the different types of income that we need you to list. So we'll go through that just now. So obviously Scanlon Foundation, whatever amount you want to apply for from us, up to $30,000 goes there. The in-kind contributions, it's anything that's not cash, which is not super clear really, not very specific, but ultimately that's what we're looking for in-kind. And it can be volunteer time. If you want to put a dollar value to your volunteer time, then you can. You just need to be consistent around how much you're showing as income and then how much you're showing as that expenditure, that in-kind income, and then the expenditure on the volunteers. It can be something from, that your organisation has that's being donated, people's time, resources, meeting rooms, whatever. So whatever you choose to include in the in-kind as an income, you just need to also show that as in-kind in the expenditure. Organisation core funding is probably most relevant just for large organisations. I mean, not necessarily, but if you are a smaller organisation and you don't have any core funding to contribute, that's not a problem at all. You don't actually have to show any other income at all if you don't want to. We don't require other income for this. I think largely projects do tend to have some, often they are a contribution towards another project, or there is some other funding. The government funding is the a collection of any government funding. So if you have some local council and some state government, then it just goes as a little subtotal under government funding. Other grants and donations, if you have another philanthropic grant or donations that get made towards your organisation for this, then that goes there. And fees for service. A lot of applicants won't have anything here. Perhaps if you're a social enterprise, that might be something, if it's specific for this project. If you have income coming in, something that you're selling a service or a product that's relevant, then any of the income that's planned will come in through there. Final page about the budget. Just to reiterate that the expenditure and the income should equal. So I've just put in a little example budget there that might help. So if you've got any government funding, you can just specify that it is local government. And over here, if you've got some in kind, you sort of break that down. It might be volunteer support. It might be some sort of administration. Often people have some questions, I'm just sort of anticipating any questions around equipment costs. We're really happy for you to include equipment costs that are relevant for this specific project. We did have a query about an organisation that was moving into a new venue and needed to install lifts. Really no issue at all with the need to have an accessible service, but it's not specific to this project and it's not something we'd be able to cover. If you need to buy computers, you need to have some sort of transport options, even, you know, perhaps a percentage of it would come from this project, and covering your costs that you incur, administration and rental, you know, a percentage of that is also really relevant for that. Oh, there was actually a question from someone who registered around a travel subsidy. So if your participants are needing to travel from wherever they are to training or employment opportunities, that's fine if you want to cover their costs and that's part of this project and they're doing that activity for this, then that's absolutely fine. Just having one more question. So if we have government or other funding for different projects, does it need to be included in the budget? No, so we're only looking for income that's relevant to this project. You don't need to provide us with all of your organisational income. I think there is one question in the very beginning of the application form that says, what's your overall operating budget of your organisation? I think that just sort of to give us a sense of the size of your organisation. But anything else that you're doing, we don't need to know. It really is specific to this project. So I hope that's clear. Oh, almost 1:40. Let me just click back on here. There we go. So number 5, features of a successful project. Do address the key criteria. It's really, it's a real shame for us when we're assessing it, when, you know, there is some detail in that key criteria section, but people haven't properly addressed it. So refer back to the list of the key criteria. There's explanations for each of them. Hopefully my explanation today is helpful. And just, yeah, dot points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and how you are specifically delivering on each of those 5. Really important. Number 2 is around being specific. So I've sort of touched on it a little bit through this, just to show that what you're offering is relevant to the really specific cohort of people that you're wanting to support. So are they older? Are they young people who've just left high school and they're looking for their first job? Is it women who have skills and experience from their home country, but they're just trying to get that entry into an Australian workplace? They're looking for their first job here. It does really differ, the kinds of activities that would be appropriate, and just to be clear about who you're going to work with and what you're going to do. The importance of relationships, showing that relationship with your participants, mentors, depending on the stream, and the employers. So showing that you've thought about it, you've reached out, you've got that your project design has been informed by some of those things. And just to write specifically for this grant, we do have pretty limited word count, and it will really help you if you don't just use stuff that's already written for the project. I mean, there might be little bits, but yeah, it will really help if you can target what you're saying really specifically for the things that we've outlined. Okay. Health literacy. There is a little question that's popped up around health literacy. No, it probably, well, I'm not super clear on what health literacy is, and that might be a point we get Anthea in. If you're doing English literacy and you cover topics of health, that's fine. You could do a lot of things that are really useful, as long as it's sort of in a practical sense. Health could definitely be a component about it, understanding how the system works. I'm really not sure. I'd probably have to have a little think and maybe a bit more of a chat around what that might look like. Or maybe I can invite Anthea in to have a bit of a chat at the end too. Project timelines. Is it okay if the project starts before? Yes, that's fine. Yeah, if you already have an existing project and there's a part of it that we're contributing towards, as long as you can be clear about what that part is that we do and sort of how maybe some of the learnings from the beginning that are being brought in. So there's a question about practicing and learning English literacy via poetry, rap and creative writing. Yeah, maybe we can chat some more about the health literacy around the poetry and rap and creative writing. I think if you feel that that's really relevant for the people that you're working with, and maybe if you're working with young people who might be newly arrived, I mean, not to discriminate, I'm sure a lot of older people are really into rap too, but yeah, I think it's just showing that that's relevant and that you know that they're interested in it. I mean, it's not really for me to say that it's a wrong way to learn English. It's, yeah, if you can show to me that's really going to work for them, then that's great.
Rachel, in regard to the health literacy.
Oh, thank you.
If what they're doing is learning about the health system through learning the language of the health system, then that's fine. If they're learning the English interpretation of the health system, that's not a problem at all. But we completely accept that that's a really important thing that needs to happen, whether it's in language or in English. But in this particular situation, this is about increasing their ability to speak or to read English in particular.
Okay. There was one around covering costs. Well, let me just move. Oh, questions, which is what we're doing. Around covering costs for potentially qualification at the end. So we've had this in the past where employment programs, you know, the real barrier to employment for some participants is that their qualification from their home is not recognised here. The cost of getting a qualification recognised can be really big, and it might not be worth it in that sense. I mean, there's no reason you can't. You might want to use a percentage of an employment program to contribute towards people getting their qualifications recognised. But it can be a bit prohibitive. The IELTS test, I think, is far more cost effective, and absolutely, it's going to both lead to more employment opportunities, I think, where you can show how useful it is and how it will impact on them. That's great, and you're very welcome to use some of the budget for that.
Rachel, there was a question about the financial literacy as well, and it's the same answer as for health literacy. Yeah. So if it's learning the English language around those systems, that's not a problem.
Yes, we might use the remaining part of our discussion today to go through some of your questions that were asked a bit earlier. And
thank you. Great.
Thank you everyone again for including those questions. Rachel and Anthony, the first question actually was something about DGR, which I believe Santosh asked if whether an organisation that is incorporated but they're not sure whether they have DGR would be eligible. So could you just reiterate the details around DGR?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to check is to just do an ABN lookup if you Google ABN lookup, go in, put in your ABN number, it will bring up all of your sort of registration details with the ATO. And it will include, if you're incorporated, that next step really is around that charity status, and then you'll often get the DGR. It can be quite an onerous process, so you would probably know if you have it.
It's an onerous process to get DGR. It's not an onerous process to look it up.
Yes, the checking is very easy.
Yeah, that's great. We've got a couple of questions that are about the number of grants people can apply for. Kate has asked, is it okay to apply for one grant for employment and another one for literacy, or do you think it's better to apply just for one?
You can apply for both.
Yeah, very welcome to.
And would you also accept, another question asked, would you accept 2 applications from one organisation, except one is as an auspice and another one is as a direct application? So possibly auspicing another organisation for their application, their own application as well.
If the projects are different, that's fine.
Yeah.
The one about the community hubs, Faisal, just to touch that on, that's really a question to ask Community Hubs Australia and the school as to whether or not they can register in that way. But my understanding is that there are still mechanisms for community hubs to be able to apply for grants. and to have them paid, but you'd need to check with Community Hubs Australia about that.
Another question, there's been two questions actually about scholarships. First is from Vivian asking, do you fund scholarships? And then later, another question asking if you do you support scholarship programs to improve higher access to higher education, which both target literacy and employment opportunities? So two questions, but the idea of scholarships.
I can see the link, but I would see that as an education program, not a literacy or an employment program. Yeah, I don't think we would through this grant round.
That's great. Chang's asked, if an employment project already has funding till mid-2022, could this grant be used to help ensure that the program can run to the end of 2022? Maybe we might have to follow up directly with that one. I think that's a great question, probably a bit specific. If
that's a current grantee, it would be better for them to contact us directly. Contact Rachel.
Cynthia's asked, to show the relationship with local businesses, would we need letters of support?
No, but they need to demonstrate it.
So showing your understanding of that business, what their needs are. And I think if you're going to tell us that you have that relationship and you've engaged and they've said this is what they need and you're designing your project relevant to that, we'll trust that you've done that. Yeah.
But they should be able to name the business.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, be specific. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had, on the topic of diverse groups and the focus on migrant communities, we have had two questions that ask about whether the Scanlon Foundation's grant can go towards First Nations projects. One from Kate about the nature of their project being focused only on First Nations people. And then another one, is this grant just aimed at migrant minorities? Is First Nations acceptable? So I'll throw that to you both.
It is aimed primarily at new arrivals. If the program, though, is offered to a broad range of participants that includes First Nations people, that isn't a problem. But in actual fact, we wouldn't necessarily fund a program that was specifically for First Nations, that with an understanding, of course, that we recognise how important those programs are, but it doesn't fall within the scope of what the foundation can cover. Okay,
that's great. As we're powering through these, we've got another one, two that I'm combining here. Does the grant include staff wages? And Michael has asked, will the program be able to be paid? Will it support the payment of wages of interns to help them into the workplace? He's made a comment to say, I'm not sure what an intern is. So, can they pay staff as part of the funding?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So if you have staff working on this project, you are more than welcome to use the funds to cover their time, to pay your staff. That's really appropriate. The intern, so I assume that you're going to have an intern within your own organisation. So perhaps they're both a sort of participant in the program, and part of that program is that they do some interning and internship within your own organisation. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can. I'm sure it varies around how interns are paid and whatever's appropriate for your organisation, plus kind of balancing the project costs. You're welcome to include that.
The vast majority of programs can't run without people. So absolutely, we assume that you're going to be paying people as a result of these grants.
So we've got so many great questions still coming in. Michaela's asked, if we have government or other funding for different projects we're running or general services, but not this project proposed in the application, does it need to be included in the budget?
I think I did just randomly grab that one at the end. So, but just to cover it off, no. So any of your other funding for other projects and other activities you don't need to include. We're only looking for any of the income that's for this project in particular.
But as you say, Rachel, at the very beginning, you are asked about what funding you currently receive from a broad range of services, sources for your organisation as a whole. So there's two separate parts.
Rachel, being from Western Australia, you might like this question.
Okay.
Is it a disadvantage not to be in the eastern states?
No, and we keep trying to support more Western Australians, organisations, as well as all the people.
And every other state.
And every other state. We have more of a profile in Victoria. We're able to meet with groups and people and organisations here, and I think it does sometimes mean that our funding is weighed more heavily towards Victoria, and obviously just a population size as well. We are really keen to support nationally and really look to engage. We have been trying to engage a bit more with the West Australians and Queenslanders and South Australia and Tassie and all of that. So, yeah, please don't.
I do think it's still an important question and worth asking. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
Another question is coming, would you consider funding a social enterprise as an employment pathway?
Yes.
Well, I was only going to say you would need to be able to, if you're just getting a social enterprise off the ground, you would really need to be able to articulate why you thought it was going to be successful. But that said, we recognise that there are a vast number of people who want to try and get their own businesses off the ground. So if it was a collaboration of individuals who wanted to get this started, then I think that would be perfectly acceptable as well. We're really looking for anything that helps people into employment. So if it was that type of a program, you'd want to be looking for whether or not there were mentors in place to help people in that program, whether or not they were getting the right sort of supports for that. Is it just a hit or miss? If they make it, they make it. If they don't, they don't. I think we just need to make sure that all of those different elements are demonstrated.
Thank you.
We have some great programs that are, social enterprises, and they can provide a really good sort of workplace experience opportunity that's supported and a great entry into further employment. But yeah, often they're not just starting out. They've been going for a few years and have a lot of different parts in place.
So Pat, we've just got a couple more questions before we wrap up. We have a question around, can we apply for funds to expand an existing government funded program?
So if there's an existing government funded program that you want the extra funds for, I mean, yes. And I think if you're looking to, it's been successful and you want to expand, there's been great demand for it and you need additional funding. Things have come up, some learnings through the project, and now you need to add additional supports or, a different direction. There's lots of reasons why it would be appropriate. You just need to explain what that is.
Right. Does the project need to be focused in one state exclusively? The form seems to allow for selecting only one. That's a great question.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's just unusual that it would cross multiple states. Often it crosses multiple LGAs.
If it's web-based or something like that, Rachel, I could see how it could go across a number. Yeah. So in actual fact, it's not restricted to one geography. If you had to only choose one, I would choose the one where you are based and where the project is being originated from.
And then just add detail for the others in the project description and let us know.
Yep.
Our final question is two that I'm going to lump together. It is a question we've been grappling with for some time internally within our own team. Is what time frame considers a person a migrant? Does the only cover?
I know. I said new arrivals. I think that's what threw them. But in actual fact, anybody that falls under that category of migrant is covered. So no, it can be from any time period.
So, and I guess the other question sort of answers that, but possibly are people seeking asylum who have been here since 2013 but are still very disadvantaged in legacy caseload still considered new arrivals in terms of this program? So I think, Anthony, you've answered that one.
Yeah.
But I think too, you know, there are some programs that work perhaps with young people, and some may be considered new arrivals and some might be second generation. And I think as a group,
absolutely.
Yeah, sort of common barriers that they're facing. And so that new arrivals thing, I think, might have thrown people. We really are working with minority communities, across the board.
Well, I think we should wrap up there.
Okay.
That's all the questions we have. So I'll throw it back to you, Rachel, to conclude our session today.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I just wanted to share contact details. That's our general email. We are a very little team. Anthea, Faisal and myself, we have the whole foundation. Faisal and I just work Monday to Thursday. So if you do send us an email on Friday, my apologies, it will probably be Monday before we get back to you. Feel free to give me a call while we're in lockdown. That gets forwarded to my phone, and just to keep in mind the closing date for Friday, 17th of September. If there are any questions we've missed, we will get back to people, and obviously this information session has been recorded, which you'll be able to access if that's helpful for you, and feel free to share it. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for taking time out from today. And we look forward to reading some exciting applications. Thanks so much, everyone.